What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Big Blue in the Bronx channel. We are back with our first baseball off-season stream. So I'm going to introduce every member of our cast. We're going to go through the segments. We're going to do all that. So technically you could say to my right, Sir Angry John. To my bottom, we have Mike Silva of Talkin Mets. And to the bottom right, we have Armand. So in that order, I'd like to get through first thoughts. I'm obviously a Yankee fan, but I'm the moderator. We're going to talk and discuss because I do know enough about the Mets where I can pitch in some of these segments. But anyways, Angry John, what are your first thoughts on the Mets offseason?
Well, for anyone that hasn't been paying attention, because we're in the middle of football season, basketball and hockey, free agency has pretty much started. It starts after the World Series, and we had a few signings already. And we've also had some new managers go from old places to new places. But, I mean, for Mets, obviously, new manager in Carlos Mendoza, no more Buck Showalter, and new president of David Stearns. He's the guy in charge now, and no more Billy Epler. We've also done a lot of different things with changing of scouting and getting a lot of old faces out of here as Stearns completely overhauled this front office. But we haven't really seen any player moves yet, but I'm sure that'll come as free agency passes along. But before we go into that further, I got to thank Mike Silva from Talkin Mets for coming on and give him his first thoughts.
Listen, Luca, you're in the Bronx, Luca. So am I in the Bronx now on this little thing? Am I physically what part? Bronx Neck? Am I in the South Bronx?
I actually live in Brooklyn. John lives in Brooklyn as well, but
Brooklyn.
I'm not the head of this channel. My brother is, obviously Alex. Everybody knows him, but he owns he runs the channel. He calls this Big Blue in the Bronx because he does Giants and Yankees content. Bronx is for the Yankees. That's where they play. But yeah, we're in Brooklyn. But I just want to say real quick before we get to Mike, I know John's really happy that the Mets non-tendered Daniel Vogel back. But he absolutely was against it.
Me too.
Mike, first thoughts.
Well, first, where in Brooklyn are you guys? Because I grew up on 18th Avenue and 71st Street, lived there for 23 years. Bensonhurst. My family has moved to Staten Island since I'm on Eastern Long Island now. So where are you in Brooklyn? I have to know this. I can't not.
79th. I'm not far from where you grew up. I'm at 79th and 21st in Bensonhurst.
Look at that. It's a small world over there. Bensonhurst is a much different place. What about you, Angry John? You're very angry. Where are you in Brooklyn? You're in Brooklyn too, right?
I'm in New Jersey. I'm born and raised in Jersey.
John is in
yeah, I'm actually in Bay Ridge right now.
All right, Bay Ridge. So there we go. So there's a lot of connections here.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of connections. Well, thanks for having me. For those who don't know, I've been hosting for a long time, since 2016, a show, Talkin Mets. I've done other things, all sports, been on a defunct ESPN affiliate out on Long Island, a long-time radio station, WGVB, doing my own, all sports talk, but been doing Talkin Mets, TalkinMetsPodcast.com. You can get it every week. Subscribe on Apple. And now I've been adding some newsletter content with some video and audio. Not quite as cool as you guys. I got to tell you, that intro, I don't know how you get away with all the trademark infringement. God bless you on it. I'm looking at this. I'm like, wow, these guys are good. It's like I'm on TV. I feel, and I didn't even comb my hair. I let my hair go. So, so I do the newsletter, substack.com/Talkin Mets, no G, Talkin Mets, no G, Beyond the Mic. That's the whole thing. So, I'm happy to be here. We're kind of just cracking off the cellophane in the off season. And I know I heard you guys talking before when I was in the green room, and I think you're right. I think the theme was you guys felt the Mets aren't a World Series contender, or they can't build a World Series team. And I think where we are now with the game, I call it the tournament era. You had an 84-win team make the World Series in the Diamondbacks. The Phillies, the last couple of years, finishing 10, 12 games out of first place, nearly making the World Series this year, made the World Series last year. With the way the wild card is, you got to get in. If you have the right pieces and you have the right tournament team, you can go far. That doesn't mean you're going to win 100 games, but you could go far. And I think that the Mets, because there's so much uncertainty, what do they have in the minor leagues? The president of baseball operations just took over the team, and he's trying to figure out to build the infrastructure, build the front office, has a new manager. So I think they could put together a competitive team that could win 87, 88 games. And I think that might be enough to make the postseason. That's not going to make you guys excited, and that's not what you want to be. But once you're in that series, that 100 and that 88 it doesn't matter. It's really one extra win a month. The guy that wins 95 versus the Diamondbacks is one extra win a month. So I think the goal is how can you balance the long term and now and do it in a way where you could be competitive. And it's hard, but they got the guy that everyone says is the best in the game that was available. So I guess we'll see.
Armand.
Let's see. The bench coach. When do you expect them to hire somebody? Do you think after the holidays, maybe the weekend, maybe next Monday?
Well, I think that they're going to want their staff to be in place before the winter meetings. I heard Phil Nevin. Willie Randolph is out. That was just reported by Anthony Reber of Newsday, I believe, just a couple of minutes ago. I thought that was a little weird bringing Willie back. Willie didn't leave on the greatest terms. And it's always odd seeing someone like when Mike Woodson was an assistant coach with the Knicks a couple of years ago. It was weird for me. I'm like, well, he used to be. That's just my thing. Like,
right.
This day and age, things evolve and change and what have you. So
but
I
also like to say about Willie, different regime. Cohen's here
Sure.
now. The Will Ponds one. It's a whole new different regime.
Sure. I think with whoever Carlos Mendoza is comfortable with, that can help provide him with counsel, and be somewhat of a, I don't want to say the adult in the room. A mentor is fine. I'm at a point with baseball and coaches and managers. I can't figure it out anymore because to me, I was all about Buck and I would have kept Buck. And a few years back, I wanted Joe Girardi. I was always about that old school manager. And all I can say is this: if it's Phil Nevin, I thought he was a pretty solid bench coach with the Yankees. I mean, remember what was he telling them? Blank you in Houston. Remember that whole thing with Nevin?
Yep.
And you want to kind of bring guys in that each have something there. I think ultimately the partnership with Stearns and Mendoza, and that's what I took away from the press conferences, that the Mets have not had truly a GM, or you want to call him a president of baseball operations, or a manager that has really been on the same page in a long time. Going back to Davey Johnson, I mean, Davey and Frank Cashin never really got along. Bobby V and Steve Phillips fought like cats and dogs. Omar, and you mentioned Willie just before, not always on the same page. Even Sandy Alderson and Terry Collins weren't always on the same page. That happens. That happens in any kind of relationship in business, but it's not functional. If you get along and if you're not like-minded, but work together and understand each other's position, the results could be that much greater. Maybe Davey and Frank Cashin talked a little more. Maybe Lenny Dykstra doesn't get traded. Who knows what could happen. Brody Van Wagen and Mickey Callaway was a bad mix, a real bad mix. So
awful.
Buck and Epler, I thought that was something that would have worked, but apparently Buck was somewhat foisted on Epler, and by the end of the season, they didn't even talk. So I think that's going to be the biggest key. And as long as everybody's on the same page and you're building top down, they have not built top down in a long time. I have to at least sit back and say, these guys know a little bit more than I do.
Yeah. Armand, did you want to offer any first thoughts? I know you wanted to respond on one of Mike's things, but if you want to offer your first thoughts, you can.
Thank God Vogelback is gone. He was just god awful. And I can't believe that not him. I know his play was dreadful, but the fact that Epler and Buck, supposedly that was that's what they fought over. It's not surprising because front offices now want to run the team, especially with analytics, with lineups and bullpens and getting so many,
Yeah, it was so frustrating, and I think personally, Daniel Vogelback was the poster child of everything that's wrong, and it was deeper than Daniel Vogelback. Epler, being an analytics guy, looked at everything with data sheets, and I'm a little surprised because he fancied himself when he was interviewing his first press conference, he learned under Gene Michael, and Gene Michael's from this tree of Buck too that goes all the way back. And Gene Michael was an analytics guy, but analytics was in infancy. But he played the game. He had scouting chops. I met Gene Michael one time in Trenton, and it's such a presence. Being in the press box and being around him, such a presence. And I wish I had more time to talk to him. God rest his soul. So Vogelback, if you look at the numbers against right-handed pitching, was an elite run creator. And Darren Ruff, because you have to bring in Darren Ruff because it's kind of the same thing, was an elite run creator against lefties. And they didn't want to give up their farm system to go out and get a big-time hitter. So they decided, let's piece it together with a platoon. And I think Vogelbach worked somewhat his first few months when he was here last year. And then this year, when you got to see him over a large sample size, you saw there's holes in his game. And maybe he put a little bit of pressure on himself. Now he's the full-time, because when you're lefty, you're pretty much the full-time DH. He put some pressure on himself. The team wasn't producing. He wasn't producing. And he became the reason. Like, there's always a scapegoat in sports. You guys know, like Zach Wilson, Daniel Jones. We hear that with Daniel Jones now. And look, I'm not saying the fans are wrong, but somebody needs to be angry at somebody. So Vogelbach became that guy, when in reality, the Mets had injuries, and those injuries piled up, and they had massive underperformance, historically bad underperformances by some guys that you can't even explain. Pete Alonso had bad stretches. But ultimately, when Verlander and Scherzer, and then you lost Quintana, and your depth pitching was bad. And I mean, Oakland A's bad. Look early in the year, like the walks, like the Mets were like hanging out with Oakland in terms of pitching. You're not going to win. I was surprised when they were 14-7. And I kept telling people, this is bad. Now, you were hoping that they had time, and then they go into Yankee Stadium. They win a ball game late July, and the decision they made was that it wasn't worth trying. When you look at it, they could have probably snuck in with 84 wins. Maybe. Would you have these prospects? No. But these prospects will determine whether or not it was worth ripping the thing apart. Gilbert seems impressive. We'll see about Acuna and some of the other guys. But, I think to answer your question, and I'm long-winded, I apologize. That's just how I am.
All right.
I don't think Vogelbach was the problem, but I think it's important for him to get out of here. And I wish him well. And now he could go DH, make some money in a second division club, and be traded for the next contender, to be fooled by the fact that he can hit right-handed pitching at this elite level,
Here's the one thing I'll add, because I was a big proponent, and I'm not saying Vogelbach was the only problem, but he was a problem because of how they used him, and also that he was a liability on the bases. He was a liability defensively, because remember, he can't play the field.
Sure.
He couldn't play the field. He couldn't run. And basically, you're kind of bringing limited players and part of your ball club, because not only do they have him, they had Tim LeCastro last year, who was basically a designated pinch runner for Daniel Vogelbach if he got a hit in the middle innings. Luis Guillorme was a limited player because he was more for defensive purposes, even though Lindor is pretty much a great defensive shortstop, and that's Guillorme's natural position. So that's what frustrated me a lot about Vogelbach. He also, for a guy that was supposed to do a lot more, it was painful to see him not swing the bat in a lot of cases, and he wasn't a very good low ball zone hitter. He liked it up high, or he liked it level in.
He kind of had that weird, like that.
He had that
like that.
Right.
Yeah, I understand. So you're right. You're right.
So he didn't. So it was pretty easy for pitchers to, if you can pitch the lower half of the plate, he's pretty much almost a guaranteed strikeout, or an out, because for a guy that was supposed to bring power, he just didn't really bring it. And it's not that we gave up really. I mean, at the time we gave up Colin Holderman for him, and it looked like a promising reliever, although he didn't have the greatest year with Pittsburgh. So who knows? Maybe it doesn't work out for them. That's why I was frustrated, more so that they gave up a chance at a good reliever, considering our bullpen has been in shambles for quite some time.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. I remember when I first saw that trade, I was like, your first reaction to the trade is like,
I was like,
even with Ruff, I was like,
I had to read the name again to make sure.
Yeah, and then Naquin, I was like, But then, I saw them play. I'm like, all right, I get it. They don't want to touch their prospects. And that's why this is so hard. Rebuilding and contending, I think, is a thing that every team should try to do. You can't just have these endless. There's too many things going on in this world. Look at you guys. You're doing all sports. The Mets stink. The Yankees stink. You'll complain about it for a little bit. You're moving on. You're not going to Yankee Stadium for bat day every year. You're not going to go run the bases at Citi Field. People move on. I'm serious. People move on.
No, you're right.
Now there's going to be 100 lost seasons and things don't work out. And that's inevitable. But especially when you have 3 wild cards, there's got to be a pathway to show the fan base, hey, yes, we can do X, Y, and Z, and we don't want to give up A, B, and C, but this is at least a competitive team. Like, I even look at the NBA, and if you look, it's gotten a little bit better. Even though there's bad teams, the Charlotte Hornets, the Knicks played the Charlotte Hornets the other night. It's not like it's a guaranteed win. They can beat you. They're a bad team. Don't get me wrong. And there's bad teams that are really bad. But how many teams, like, even in football, is there really bad, tanking, no competitive teams like that they can't win? I know it's a different sport. Like the other sports, I feel, and I can't really speak as much to hockey, I feel like it's not, the gap is as wide. Even though you're bad and you win 75 games, if you're competitive, it's not like every game you're shutting the TV off and then, like that. In baseball, I feel like you've had that, and that's not good. Oakland, perfect example.
Oh, yeah.
And no matter how bad you are in baseball, you're probably going to win 50 or 60 games because there's still AAA players. They're not like me going out there and pitching. But it's just, I think the gap is so much wider. So, part of that, I think, is good what David Stern's doing. Not that I'm comparing with the Mets with some of the Pirates or some of the teams, but I think to be able to say, hey, we're going to do both, it's important.
Yeah, definitely. Just want to shout out to everybody in the chat. If you're new here, guys, hit the like button, subscribe, do all the good stuff. Check out Mike. Alex posted the link to Talkin Mets. Disgruntled, Anthony Garcia, Brad, what's up? Barbara, what's up? Jacob, what's up? I know Brad's going off on John. He likes to poke fun at John. He calls him feeble because the feeble Mets, obviously associated with Frank the Tank. That's the nickname. But I was actually going to remark on when you guys were talking about the prospects and all. Like, as an outsider, I actually thought it was probably the best idea for the Mets to end up selling Scherzer and Verlander because I didn't see much of a window for either of them. I thought it was a 2-year window at best for the Mets. But I think we can head into our segments, and the first one is the big move of the offseason so far. Obviously, they got rid of Buck. They got rid of Epler. The Mets decided they had their eyes on Craig Counsell. He ends up going to the Cubs. The Mets did not. I think it was reported either by Martino or somebody else that the Mets, didn't kind of lowball Counsell. I shouldn't say lowball, but they didn't give him the offer that he wanted. He ends up going to the Cubs, I believe, $8 million per year. That's the highest manager salary thus far. The Mets ended up hiring a former Yankee bench coach in Carlos Mendoza. I'm going to go with John to Mike to Armand. What are your expectations of Mendoza? What do you want to come out of him? I know he's a first-time manager. So talk about it, John.
So the initial reaction, that I will admit, that is not the guy I originally wanted. Now, I'm going to give him a fair chance because they're really, I tried, all right, when I first, my initial reaction and thought, I tried finding something bad about him. Okay, what's something that's not good? And there wasn't too many articles that had any or too many chats that had anything bad to say about him. He is the players do respect him and like him. So hopefully, we've had some clubhouse issues in past years, and hopefully, he can take care of that. But also, what I think this hire is, I think this is a hire where, okay, the Mets they're looking to be more analytical, obviously with David Stearns coming in. And I firmly believe that with David Stearns, I think he's going to have a lot of influence on, not obviously the roster itself, but the lineup and all a lot of the decisions that are in game. And not to say Mendoza won't have any power, but I think Stearns in the front office will have a good amount of say on what goes on with this ball club in game.
Okay, Mike.
Look, I don't know what Carlos Mendoza is going to be, but I can tell you, he's clearly a family guy. I thought the story about how he went out, was playing catch with his son, and he got the news. I mean, maybe that's a bit of a narrative, but I thought that was nice. I thought it was sincere. Son of he almost became an engineer. Coached in New York, understands, look, it's a culture in the Bronx. We were talking in the green room before. My friend Luca up there is not happy with Aaron Boone and the Yankees. So he knows how critical everybody could be. I like the fact that he can hold players accountable and understand players, do it in a way where it's not like a militaristic way, but hey, yeah, we're partners, so to speak, but I'm the boss. And if I'm not just going to coddle you because I'm afraid to offend you. None of that stuff. I think the fact that he's bilingual is big. I think the fact that he could connect on both sides of the clubhouse. I mean, the Latino contingent is huge in the game today. And look, you have to understand everybody's different. Everybody comes from different cultures and backgrounds, and how you communicate is not a one size fits all. I think a lot of the things that he is promising about, Buck was doing, but he's younger and he could partner better with the front office, like I said before. And ultimately, I hope that the fans don't you can't keep switching managers. And at one point, Jim Leland was a nobody. David Johnson was a nobody. Everybody was a nobody. Craig Counsell was a nobody. One of the biggest things I was happy to hear is that when he was in spring training as a player with the Giants, how much he lopped up from Dusty Baker. And I think I've been critical of Dusty Baker in the past. Wasn't always the biggest fan. The toothpick always bothered me. But after I saw what he did with Washington, what he did with Houston was a tough spot he came in. Chicago, Cincinnati. I mean, this is a guy that everywhere he went turned it around like that. And if you could learn some good principles, because Dusty was a good communicator, he got his players to play hard for him. He was holding them accountable. Look, that man would probably still be managing if the game didn't change and he wanted control, because right now the managers really have to be part of a cabinet. And it's not my lineup card and you go into the ivory tower. So I think that was positive. I think the Yankee experience is a good thing. I think having New York experience is a good thing. Nobody in the Yankees has any reason to praise this guy if it's not true. I mean, why? So that's all I can say is it sounds good, but don't tell me, show me, right? Isn't that the way it goes?
Right. Definitely. And I could say real quick before I get to Armand, I was reading up on some stuff like, again, I didn't really see much of I'm a Yankee fan. I obviously know of Mendoza, he was basically Aaron Boone's right-hand man. And it was seen like I was reading some articles. I don't know if it was Sherman or whoever. They said, Mendoza is kind of like an Aaron Boone, but he has a little bit of a harder side where he can hold those players accountable. So at least that's a hope for you guys. But I'll get to Armand. What are your expectations?
My expectations is I hope he can balance analytics with a little bit of old school. If he feels that, if analytics is showing, I'm going to use this pitcher, Drew Smith. If analytics is showing Drew Smith should be the guy to come in, but Mendoza feels in his gut, in his brain, that he shouldn't go to Drew Smith in this situation, don't use analytics. Go with your gut. As much as your gut and analytics can both be wrong. Not going to Drew Smith might cost us the game. Going to Drew Smith might cost us the game. I want to see him balance analytics and old school managerial decisions on the manager. I know it's mostly more front office based now, making decisions on everything from lineup to bullpen to starters. But I want to see him do that balance. I've seen nothing but good things after he was hired, but I was like, John, are you kidding me? Mendoza. But I saw him on Foul Territory, and he talked about how he got the phone call Sunday night getting the Mets job. So obviously, if that happened, the Mets knew that Craig Counsell Sunday was not coming.
I think they knew way before that. I think they don't leak anymore. I don't think Craig Counsell had no interest in New York. You got to go on the interview. You never know. It's a Midwest guy.
I think he wanted either Milwaukee or he wanted Chicago.
Yep.
That's all I think he
wanted. He could live in Milwaukee. He could shoot down and commute. It's easy. And not everybody wants to be here. I understand it,
Armand, I do want to bring up, I do like your point on you got to be a little like, if you're a manager in this game, you got to have a good gut feeling, and you got to just got to have that managerial feeling. I'll give you an example. So you can look past any of the past 3 World Series, whether it was this year with Bochy, it was last year with Dusty, or the year before with Brian Snitker. All of those guys at times have said, you know what, at one point in their career, something ain't right, or this is the right thing to do. We need to keep going. For instance, right, Luca, there was a game I forgot what game we called. I think it was game 4 or 5 of the World Series, if I'm not mistaken, where they had Andrew Heaney as the starter. Andrew Heaney was probably not supposed to pitch, into the 5th inning because it was probably going to be an Andrew Heaney and Dane Dunning getting the first 5 or 6 innings, and then the bullpen will close it out. Bochy saw that Heaney was pitching well and that it was kind of a one-sided game, said, you know what, I'm going to keep letting Heaney pitch, and I'm going to keep, riding this out. And he did for as long as he could. That's something I like on Armand's point. You got to be able to balance it out because with Mendoza, right, you're bringing in Stearns who, and remember, when Cohen first came here, Cohen said, I want this, to be like the East Coast Dodgers because the Dodgers use a lot of analytics, do a lot with their farm system, right? A lot of homegrown, developed talent, and that's what the Mets are trying to do. But at some point, you got to have a manager, and I hope this is the guy. I am praying and rooting that Mendoza can be, how Mike said, a nobody turning into a somebody. Because, like he said, whether it was Davey Johnson or Dusty Baker, that could
Everybody starts somewhere.
You got to start somewhere, and I pray and I wish nothing but the best that it is here.
So just going to comment real quick. Brad says, damned if you do, damned if you don't when it comes to analytics, definitely. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, you guys were remarking on it, obviously, with the managerial decisions. And I think if I'm going to guess your thought process, John, when you said you were trying to find the bad things in Mendoza, you kind of had flashbacks to, like, hiring a first-time manager and, like, Callaway and Rojas, but like Rojas, should I say, Mendoza actually has a ton of minor league managerial experience. Right. He started, I think, with the Staten Island Yankees, I want to say, in 2009. Then he worked his way to Charleston, and then he made his way up to the big leagues in 2018. He was, again, mostly in the farm system, and he worked his way up in 2018 as the bench coach, so he's been mostly there.
Right.
But
and I like to say, in terms of those two guys and why it didn't work out, I remember Callaway. I mean, not only he was a little clueless, but also that was a bad locker room. The stories that came out, that was a bad locker room. And then Rojas got thrown into the fire. I don't think he was ready for that job. Remember, Beltran was hired originally. Then after the whole Houston Astros scandal, they kind of just said, you know what, we're going to go with Luis Rojas. And unfortunately, I don't think he was ready for that role. But nevertheless, I'm hoping it turns out different. Because another thing I must say, here's something I want different from Buck. I feel like at times the media ate Buck up a little. And I kind of want him like Mendoza. He's been in New York before. He's, as you mentioned, with the Yankees. So he kind of knows how, crazy the media and the fans are. So hopefully that is a plus with that experience.
I must say, like, obviously Met fans, they're loyal, hellishly loyal. But I think they're slowly running out of patience. Now they understand, I think, in my opinion, from the outside view, that they might not make the playoffs this year. If they do, they'll probably just squeak in. Maybe next year they're a playoff team. So, which goes to Mike's point where he talked about Craig Counsell. Not everybody wants to come to New York because New York is obviously big expectations, the big city, the big lights. And would Craig Counsell want to take on like a city of that like caliber? And obviously not everybody's built for that. The Mets aren't exactly not a patient fan base because of all the losing that's gone on. So to move from one area to the next, we've went over the manager already. We're going to go into an area of the team that is the starting rotation. Now, obviously the Mets they had Scherzer and Verlander last year. They ended up trading them. They signed Jose Quintana. They've also had some failed starters in their own organization. So right now, your only constant right now stands as Kodai Senga, who really finished the year off well last year. You also have Jose Quintana, who didn't do too bad of a job. But right now, the other three spots remain in limbo, even including guys like David Peterson, Tyler McGill. Where do they go? Do they fit in as the bullpen, long relievers? So I'm actually going to start with Mike, then to Armand, then to John. How do you see the starting pitching rotation coming out after free agency? Who are your ideal targets? And do you think anybody's coming up from the farm system this year to be ready for that starting pitching job, whether it's a front end rolled or a back end roll?
I think the minor league, the kids, the Scotts, the Vazels, the Hamels, the Tidwells, there's so much uncertainty. How good can they be? How ready are they? What are they? A 3, a 4, a 5? I think that uncertainty creates some cloud about what they can do. So I think it looks like they're trying to go value driven. You've already seen Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson, guys sign 1 year, $11, $12 million deals. That's probably what a Luis Severino would get out in the marketplace. someone like that. Maybe they go and they reunite with Seth Lugo as a back in the rotation guy. So you're probably going to see them go a veteran on that 1-year value route. Now, whether they could get in on because Yamamoto is the big fish here, and everybody wants him, and the Mets got Senga supposedly, and whether he wants to play with another Japanese player, does he want to go to the Bronx where there's a better history of Japanese success? It's not going to be easy for the Mets to outbid the Yankees. This will be the first time these two teams potentially could go at it. The Mets have always said, all right, Mussina, you guys go after him. Giambi, you guys go after him. Teixeira, Sabathia, I don't want to get it. They never want to lose to the Yankees, especially when the Wilpons were owners, because they knew what comes of it. You're going to get scorned. Here, I don't think Cohen's not going to care about that. And personally, I don't either. Look, if you go out and you lose and the guy wants to pitch for the Yankees and the money's the same, because I know the money could be the same if the Mets want the money to be, there's no shame in that. So it really starts and ends with Yamamoto at the top end. And then would they, if they got Yamamoto, still want to pivot and try to sign Montgomery and because he's going to be expected, 5 years, 125 maybe, something like that. So now you've got 2 long-term commitments. You've got Senga. You've got potentially your value signing in a Severino or a Seth Lugo or someone like that. And then you could play around with your 3 or 4. You mentioned McGill, Peterson when he comes back midseason, Buto's in there. And then the kids are on. Now you've got 10 options to play with. But if Yamamoto doesn't sign, I think they're going to go very value-driven. And we haven't even kind of looked at the trade market. Dylan Cease, Bieber, Glasnow. All those are risky guys, especially Bieber, injury. Glasnow, major injuries. Cease, down year. You think the White Sox are going to give up Cease without asking for a top prospect? I'm not saying it's Acuna or Gilbert but it's going to be somebody that you like.
He has 2 years of control as Cease.
Yeah.
So he's going to cost you a lot. I think Glasnow, because he has 1 year left, like a Corbin Burns, and he's projected to make $25 million. He might not cost less because Tampa.
You got to give up something. You got to give up something. And you don't know. Now that guy's hurt and he gives you 7 starts. Now you just gave up a prospect for $25 million, and now you have a problem. So I think the trade market's going to be tough. Because I don't think anybody just wants to dump. Maybe Tampa, maybe, like you said. Now, if they want to dump Glasnow for nothing and it's money, it's Cohen's money. He pissed a lot more money away on Trevor Gott than he would on Glasnow for $25 million, paying for prospects. I don't think the guy wants to do that all the time. I think he wants to,
he wants to see a return in his investment.
He wants to see a return. Yeah. So I think it's very tricky, the rotation. I think the free agent market is the way to go. Non-qualifying offer. No qualifying offer. They were never going to be in on Sonny Gray, not a New York guy. They're never going to be on Nola qualifying offer. Blake Snell qualifying offer, very much a long-term deal, a guy that I could see be very disappointed. You talk about Carlos Rodon, I could see Blake Snell being like that. See, that's the kind of guy you want to stay away from. For 1 year,
would David Stearns make the call to his buddies up in Milwaukee? For Corbin Burns,
it could cost. There's some, injuries there too. I really would be curious. Like, he doesn't know the farm system. He got scout reports. Maybe he's watched from afar, but he's now got into the position. He's got a new VP of amateur scouting in Chris Gross. These guys know the system, but they haven't been around these players. So would you like some time to take a look at what you have?
Was Gross with the Astros last year? Because he would know Clifford and
right. He'll know Clifford and Gilbert, but it's broader than that. What do you like about that? Look, you could get up to snuff. There are guys that are holdovers, but you're having a new front office. You have, Andy Green, player development. Do you want to all of a sudden grab these prospects, dump them off as part of your win now portion when money could be more used for your win now? And risk having, I just traded Fernando Tatis. Look at how Fernando Tatis Jr. got on the Padres. James Shields. That's what you could be doing. And you don't want that. And let me tell you, if I'm David Stearns, I don't want that, because right now you've got a clean slate, but you got this anvil on your back of 40 plus years of disappointment and paranoia. Like you said, Mets fans who the bloom is off the rose with Cohen. They're not mad at him, but they're like, all right, now we get it. You're rich. You got money. Now they expect it. It's not like, oh, thank you. Thank you for being the safe thing. you get only a couple of years of that. That's over, guys.
$19.8 billion net worth.
That's it. It's over.
And it's going to get it, and his net worth's going to keep growing.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. So I would say this. I think they go all in on Yamamoto. I'm not sure if they will then, if they get him, is a Montgomery type feasible. And I think everybody else is going to be those 1-year type deals. Or if they trade for somebody, I think that's less likely because I don't know if they want to give up the capital unless it's a total like, hey, we'll take on your salary. Then I could see that. That's how I see them going. And
would they take back a bad contract to lessen the trade value?
Correct. More likely you could do that. Then you could spend on the bullpen because there is some bullpen arms that you could buy on short-term deals. You know, I have a piece going up tomorrow on the newsletter about could you create a super bullpen with you have Diaz, you have Rayleigh. You know, do you go out and sign a couple of closers like a Chapman, like a Robertson? Do you do that? 1-year deal for Robertson, maybe a 2-year deal for Chapman. I know Chapman is not vintage Chapman, but he's not chopped liver. And remember, you can say, well, he wants to close. In an analytics world, a closer is going to be at the highest leverage. You know, Diaz might pitch the 8th inning and then Chapman will pitch the 9th. He could get his saves. If that's what he's worried about, I really believe that teams are going – you saw the Mets do it, Robertson. I think the save is still going to be there, but I think teams are like, hey, the 9th inning doesn't necessarily mean that's when you get it. If 3, 4, 5 is up in the 8th inning, I want you – it makes a lot of sense. Like when you really boil it down, the way it's been done for years is dumb. Now, I know psychologically, I've talked to closers, psychologically the 9th inning is up here. But if you tell the guy, hey, listen, the highest leverage situation, start preparing because they got to get ready and everything like that, they'll learn. They're adaptable. And I think the modern player, at least I think, you know, Diaz, they did a little bit of it, not as much as they did Robertson. They did a lot with Robertson, high leverage situation. I think as long as that player is prepared and knows how to read the room, so to speak, they can get it done.
Now, before I get to Armand, John is a fan of this pitcher. If let's just say maybe, well, I should say for the back end of the rotation. What about an Eduardo Rodriguez? Now he was obviously he declined. He didn't waive his no trade clause for LA during the trade deadline. Now he's interested in LA, but how would you feel for him as a back end rotation guy?
For me or for Armand?
No, I was gonna say for you before I get to Armand.
I mean, he's going to cost you probably. See, the problem again I have at Rodriguez is the year. Like it's years of money. It's not my money. It's not going to prevent me as a GM, if I was the GM, from getting other players. Fine, but he's a guy that's been spotty. It's good, bad. He's got some spottiness. I think it depends on the cost. I will say they lose out on Yamamoto. I think that becomes much more realistic. I'm not sure how deep into the spend and years and investment they want to go if they sign Yamamoto. If they don't get Yamamoto, I think it's wide open. I think Rodriguez is there. Montgomery is there. Because I don't
Snell be there. Would Snell be there?
They're not going to give up the draft pick. And I really, for a 7-year deal, Snell to me.
They would rather make a trade for a pitcher than go after Snell?
Yeah, I would probably. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I know what you're going. Like you give up a prospect or you give up the draft pick. That's probably where you're going. I think at that point you have to target the right pitcher to acquire. Look, I don't think this is the best way to do it. You could conceivably go value, 1-year deal, build a rotation around Quintana and Senga and a lot of number 4s. Look, the 99 Mets did it with Al Leiter, and they had to go out and you could go out and acquire someone midseason and have a really strong bullpen. You know, 5-inning guys, 6-inning guys, maybe they get an opener here. If you get a 7, 8, 9, you got the 9th lockdown. Like Diaz, unless he reverts back, he's locked. So if you get 5 quality innings or 6 quality innings, I need 6 outs. It's math, guys. This is where analytics is not overly complicated. I was not a guy that I didn't do great. I failed my Regents test. I don't know if they still do Regents. I failed my Regents. I'm no genius.
I sucked at math. I sucked at math in
okay.
school.
I'm not a genius. It's math. There's 27 outs. I got 3 on the back end, so I only need 24 outs. I get 15 to 18 on the other side. So I got 21. 27 minus 21. What does that mean? 6 out. Get me 6. Get me 6 outs. That's it at that point. And I don't need to spend $1 billion for that. So,
Mike, would they be in on a Yuka Matsui, who was a closer overseas?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the thing about these Japanese guys, like, how good are they? I think the Far East market is, I believe, with Senga's success, with Yamamoto coming over, and now remember, there's some nationalism there. The Japanese people, take it from someone who knows associates who do business with Japanese people. They don't necessarily love this country all that much, I have to say.
No,
that doesn't mean they don't want to come here and make money and adapt and adjust. I'm not saying Senga doesn't love to come, but they are very prideful about their country. And
there's
leaving
also
their team is a big deal. It's a big deal.
Another Japanese pitcher, Shota Amago.
Yeah, lefty, crafty.
Yeah.
I think that he's a guy that probably would fall more, from what I've been told, back in the rotation. I mean, it's so hard.
But they would be in on him?
I can see that, yeah. I really believe it's going to be guys who are not qualifying offers, Far East, value-driven, starts with Yamamoto, ends with Yamamoto in the sense where now we pivot to plan B. Yamamoto comes on with Yamamoto, Senga, Quintana. And look, Yamamoto's a question mark. But that's a really intriguing storyline. Think about the Far East, top of the rotation. It's never been done before. Guys that
25 years old, because usually they come over when they're 30.
Yeah.
There's another kid coming over from Japan, but he's Cuban. Yario Rodriguez. He's 26. He has nothing to do posting. You could probably sign him right now.
Right. I personally, if I were the Mets, I would be looking at all of these undervalued assets because, again, it's just money. You know what the ceiling is with some of the guys that you're signing. Like even what the Cardinals did with Kyle Gibson. The guy is a below league average pitcher. He'll give you 6 innings, 4 runs. Maybe on a good day, 6 innings, 3 runs. Nothing wrong with that. There's value. He gives you innings, but not sexy. If there's a chance that the guy that you bring from the unknown can be better and his floor is the same, and that's where scouting comes into play, because there's no analytics with these guys other than, I guess you could get them in the blender with the cameras if you can, and they're having a better upside, go for it. See, Yamamoto to me might be Blake Snell. We don't know. He could be worse than Blake Snell. He might be worse than Aaron Nola. He might be Kyle Gibson. We don't know. But the chance that he's not and that he could be vintage Max Scherzer is too great not to try. And it costs more than just the contract because there's also a percentage of the posting fee. So it's not going to be cheap. One other thing to remember with the Far East, with these guys coming over, in any free agent, I think Steve Cohen's, and this is all speculation, but I think Steve Cohen's access to the financial world allows them to be introduced to things that will be beneficial for them post-career, for their money. It's a lot of value being known as Steve Cohen at that level. All due respect, Hal Steinbrenner, he's not hanging up there. And he's not that kind of.
I completely agree.
And other guys too. There are other guys, Jim Crane. Like, they're rich guys, but they're in different businesses. Cohen's in a business that's exciting for these guys because you could, make a lot of money.
Mets be going to a 6-man rotation?
I could see that. Yeah, I think they might have to. Now that with Yamamoto and Senga, remember they paced out Senga because of that. You bring both those guys in, you have to. But the good part on that is you have some depth. Buto showed some promise. You still have McGill. McGill frustrates me, but he's there. Lucchesi to me is a very much a sleeper. I liked him. I remember watching him pitch against the Mets. I kid you not. I think it was either 2017 or 2018 in San Diego. And my dad texts me, "Oh, this guy stinks. How come they can't hit him?" I'm like, actually, he locates the ball pretty well. Because you watch him and he's like this funky guy and he's like throwing the slop and you're like, this guy stinks. How can the Mets let him off the hook? Well, no, I think he's pretty good. And he didn't know.
Would they consider him to the bullpen, or would they consider him
maybe Trevor McGill,
maybe an opener, maybe like that?
Yeah, like
just to get through the season.
Yeah, I think not Trevor McGill, like Trevor Williams was at some point. I think a 6-man rotation is there. Look, you need 10 pitchers to get through the season. Do an exercise at any point. Yankee fan, Met fan, Braves fan, whatever. Go to a team that was successful and count how many guys get one start. Just one.
Look at Texas. Look at what Texas did last year in free agency, from DeGrom to Evaldi to Heaney, and then they had all the young guys in Dunning.
Yep. And maybe the Mets do something like that. Maybe they do something like what Texas did. Now, there's not a DeGrom. Yamamoto could be considered the DeGrom type of deal. Maybe Montgomery's like an Evaldi. You can do that. There's no leaks. And other than run prevention, which is what David Stern talked about, he talked about getting better at run prevention, which is pitching and defense. So my whole theme on this offseason is all we know is he likes pitching, which includes bullpen. He likes defense, which includes getting some component players out there, maybe like a Kevin Kiermaier type for the outfield. And he didn't talk about going out and signing a DH. He didn't talk about going out there and trading Pete Alonso. Maybe that goes into run prevention. He talked about how he want to build a team. So,
Armand, your thoughts? Obviously, you asked Mike some questions, but what do you think your plan is, or what would you want the Mets to do for starters?
My plan is to go overseas, to get the Yamamotos, to get the Shotas, to get the Yalier Rodriguez's.
You want to roll the dice. He likes rolling the dice. He's a gambler at that point,
They're just going to, like you said,
get a lot of interpreters. You better get a lot of interpreters in that line.
$19.8 billion. I got enough to buy enough interpreters.
Oh my God. I'm going to have to listen. You guys, if I come back during the season and you guys are speaking Japanese, I give up. I took Spanish in high school. And I took Manhattan College Spanish, and I can't speak a lick of Spanish. My wife watches me listening to the post game. Francisco Alvarez, any of these guys, I don't know what they're saying. I took 4 years. If you think I
speak 2 languages.
I hope the translators are good. That's all.
I speak 2 languages. English and smartass.
That's right. I can tell. I can tell you're a smart. Listen. All you guys from Brooklyn and the Bronx, I could tell. All these Brooklyn guys around here. Believe me, I spent enough time in that borough to know what you. I knew you guys were from Brooklyn just by watching when I came out.
Yep.
I think the overseas guys take a chance on them. You got 2 guys that are in their mid-20s. Yamamoto at 25, the Cuban Rodriguez at 26. Shota's in his 30s. Matsui, because he has the closing experience. Obviously, when you saw Diaz during the 101 win season, if you used him back-to-back, sometimes his command and control was not there. And also now coming off the injury, you don't have to use him on back-to-back nights. At least with Matsui, I would feel comfortable that he has closing experience to close out games. And he's left-handed. So you're pairing him with Raley as the 2 lefties.
Sure.
I know John in one of his videos, he brought up Wandy Peralta for the bullpen, as a lefty.
I think it goes back to who's available, what's the price, and remember, guys, they have their own analytical formulas. Guys that we like, they may not like Cole Sosa, right? Is that how I spell his name? Cole Sosa.
Yeah.
All right. Minor league deal. They like him. They like something about him. It's so hard now because in the old days, I sound like an old fart now, but in the old days when we're doing shows like this, we're looking at it pretty much like these guys, ERA, and we can still look at some of that stuff. Now they're looking at, well, this guy's spin rate, all sorts of things. I mean, Sosa's a guy that those are those optionable arms. He's got some options. So that's a big deal. That's the other thing, he's got these 12 spots. How does he use those 12 spots? How many are minor league deals? How many are major league deals? Things like that.
They look at strikeout percentage. They look at the individual, like you said, spin rate, all those different little analytics. What are your thoughts on the starting rotation?
So the one thing, all right. So Mike brought up a lot of good points. So did Armand. Here's how I look at it, right? Whether you want to go 5-man, 6-man rotation. First off, what do we have? We have Kodai Senga, who I liked one season. I like Quintana for the back end, right? Another middle starter right there. I love that Mike brought because I think I may have texted Luca this maybe in May or June, or maybe it was his brother. Maybe it was both. But Joey Lucchesi is a guy that can give you 5-6 innings, and Mike was right. He has good location. He hides the ball well. He's got the curve pitch, which a lot of hitters aren't used to. So I think it's a really good option for them as well. Maybe he could be a fifth starter. You could try that out in spring training, see who wins. Jose Buto did show some promise. Maybe he could be some depth. Maybe if you want to go 6-man rotation, he could be your 6th starter. Fine. So you probably need realistically about 2 starters in that rotation. Now, obviously, the first guy I like to take the chance on Yamamoto. I like a lot of his location, doesn't walk a lot of guys in the Japanese league, doesn't give up the most amount of hits or homers, finesse pitcher. So with all that, you can sign him for about, I don't know, maybe north of $200 million, and then still have enough money to maybe not go get another star like Montgomery, who I think is also another good option if they didn't want Yamamoto. But I like that you said, Blake Snell's a guy that kind of could be a Carlos Rodon, very risky pitcher, gives up a lot of walks at times, pitches out of a lot of jams. Sonny Gray, you said, had the qualifying offer, doesn't like New York, right? They weren't getting Aaron Nola. I kind of thought he'd stay in Philly. But in Erod, he's not a bad option for the middle of the rotation. But I look at a guy maybe like the return of like a Seth Lugo.
I love that. I got to tell you, he showed me a lot this year in San Diego. And if you guys remember in 2016, he was a big reason why they made the postseason.
Yep.
Now, he was a good reliever, and he has that torn UCL. But I love that move, and he get him for maybe 2 years and $20 million. And he knows the market. Now, does he want to come back here? That's another story. But I think you could scoop him up. Does Stearns like him? Another story. I don't know. You want to talk about a back end guy? I'd rather him than trading for a Glasnow.
Yeah.
I think you're going to get a lot of.
I completely agree with that. And the sad part is, I always felt like we misused him. I really did like him as a starter. Not that he was horrible in the bullpen or bad by any stretch of the imagination, but Seth Lugo, a good quality guy that you can be a 4 or 5 starter. And I think he can give you 5-6 innings of like 2-3 run ball. And that's all you kind of ask for at that point. And so another guy you can maybe want to take a look at, Michael Lorenzen's an option. That's not bad. Now he's not like the first guy, but if I'm saying you really need someone, he could be like he was okay with Detroit. The Phillies, he had some nice moments. Not my first option, but maybe that's someone you could look at. But I will lie, the starting pit since we need the starting pitchers, the market for them, it's a little scary because you mentioned all the trade options out there. I don't want to touch any of our prospects for those guys because, like you said, a lot of arm injuries. Another guy that was suggested that I kind of said no right away, Brandon Woodruff. And not that I think Woodruff's a bad pitcher, and I would have loved him if he was healthy, but he just, I forgot.
He might miss this entire season.
He will. He's coming off a capsule injury, which is a serious injury. And you want to throw money on a lottery ticket? That's a lottery ticket. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't expect him to return to anywhere near his form.
Right. And I think that would be a mistake to go after him. And there's some other risky guys like, I wouldn't ever bring Stroman back. I wouldn't bring Michael Walker back.
I have 2 names I would like to bring up to you guys.
Who?
Lucas Giolito. He doesn't have a qualifying offer on him, more of a back end guy. You might be able to get him on 2 years. And also this guy who's 27 now, obviously he has a case going against him, Julio Urias.
I would stay away from Urias.
Urias is an interesting play. I wonder how the politics of him and his domestic issues. Understand people's, anger. If he's found not guilty, I mean, he's got a right to work, but I understand people's issue with that. Yeah, I wonder how that, especially because Alex Cohen, Steve's wife, is very involved with the team. I think that might be a tough one for them too.
Yeah, I personally just don't want that kind of person in the clubhouse, and I don't know how other players are going to react. And I would just stay away from any potential bad optic that could, make other teams laugh at us. And I don't want that, obviously. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, it's really a tough market out there. The guys that were signed already, Nola as a guy, I never thought he'd leave Philly. Didn't want to overspend on him. You mentioned guys like Kyle Gibson. He's a below average pitcher, if you want to call it that, to an average pitcher. You give you 6 innings of 4 or 5 run ball. And, personally, I think it's going to be kind of, if we don't get Yamamoto, then they might either pivot to a guy like Montgomery, who I think would be a good 2-3 starter, He showed we can do in the postseason as well. But if not, you might be looking at those other options like the Eduardo Rodriguez, or I would love Seth Lugo too, Mike. I'm on the Seth Lugo train. So, I mean, I hope he wants to come back. Now, you mentioned the bullpen too. I can give my thoughts on that. Obviously Diaz, huge loss for us last year, huge loss. And, I thought he was the best 2 years ago. I thought he was the best closer in baseball. Strikeout percentage was there for him. The whiff rate of other batters. I mean, electric fastball and then a nice complimentary slider to go along with it. You add Brooks Raley, who's a solid reliever. And it's weird. I thought Adam Ottavino would buy in with his option, but he didn't. So that gave us another option there. And, you look at the rest of the current bullpen, it's not a lot of guys there. I mean, you got Drew Smith, Bickford, Sean Reed-Foley, Grant Hartwig, Josh Walker, a lot of guys that tried it out last year, didn't work. Maybe Bickford makes the team. He had a solid September. But other than that, I mean, I'm kind of over the Drew Smith era, in my opinion. It's just the ineffective slider. I think that's a major problem for him, and he gives up too many homers for my liking. And I think Epler really did fail to put any money toward the bullpen. I think that was one of his biggest weaknesses. Failing to get quality outs in the back end really did hurt this team. They blew so many games last year because you knew once we got a lead, there were certain guys that just couldn't get the job done. Now, some guys you can look at, right, if you wanted to go down the bullpen route. You mentioned Aroldis Chapman. That might not be a bad idea just because he could be a setup man to Diaz, or, however you want to be that ninth inning man, or, whoever has the highest leverage, right? Obviously, Diaz would be the guy for that because he's proven it. You could bring in a Chapman, right? You could also get guys, to build around, maybe a Brent Suter, pitched in Colorado last year.
Sure.
Guy that has familiarity with David Stearns back in Milwaukee. So not a bad option there. He also pitched in a decent stat line in a high altitude because everyone knows Colorado, you're giving up 10 runs, it seems, about every day. Sure. But that's another option you could go. Maybe you want to go with a veteran in there, maybe a Will Smith from the Rangers if you wanted to go that route. Maybe you want to go the young route. Maybe you want to go with Jordan Hicks, a guy that can throw really hard, got traded last year to the Blue Jays. And that's where it seemed like he found his touch again after he got away from the Cardinals because, it was, I think with it's a little different because we're not Cardinals fans, but I think it was really different that they didn't have Yadier Molina. So a lot of their pitchers hurt after that, and you have a good game manager and catcher for a while, and then you go to someone else who's not as good. It really does take the effect. And I think Jordan Hicks could be a good option for them, maybe a 7th, 8th inning guy. So there are some guys in the relief market that I would like for them to take a look at and, sign maybe 2-3 of these guys to build that bullpen. And remember, Mike said it. You can get 5-6 innings with your starters, right? That's 15 to 18 outs. The last 3 Diaz usually would get. So add another 3. You need potentially 2-3 more innings. That's another 6-9 outs. That's what we're finding, and we need to do that consistently.
Yeah, definitely. Mike, I was told that you have to get off at 9. So if you can, offer your final thoughts, man.
Yeah. So first, thank you guys for having me. It's really cool being here, and I hope you have me again. And I apologize having to kick off. I got to get ready for Thanksgiving.
We will have you back.
You definitely will have you back. Look, I think enjoy the ride, and I want to prepare Mets fans for this. I don't think it's going to be a sexy offseason. I think it's going to be an offseason where they may get a Yamamoto, but it's not going to be like the prior offseason. I think there's going to be a lot of 1-year deal, 10 or 11 million type of things. And I think that people are going to be a little annoyed. And I think you guys said it best in the green room. It may be an 87 or 88 win team, but it doesn't mean that's where it's going to end. Nothing's going to be perfect April 1st. See where it goes. There's a lot of questions. The one thing I think, unlike the last couple of years when you had certainties because of the veterans and Buck, Questions on a manager, questions on a roster, questions on a farm system. Enjoy the ride because at least you have a philosophy and a direction top to bottom. So hopefully that made sense. Hopefully I brought something to the table, and hopefully you guys listen to all Mets fans. TalkinMetsPodcast.com. Love to have you join the community, and I love being on with some fellow Brooklynites. So please have me again. I definitely appreciate it.
Oh yeah, man, you'll definitely be back. Armand, John, and myself, we all enjoyed having you here. But again,
you guys did great.
Mike,
this is great. Great work. The everything about the studio and I love the intro, man. You guys did a great job.
Yes, if you guys haven't already, check Mike's links out. Follow him on Twitter, Talkin Mets with Mike Silva. Mike, we appreciate having on. Thanks, man.
Have a great night, guys.
Good night. Happy Thanksgiving, Mike.
Happy Thanksgiving.
All right, so we'll move up the format. So now we have just the three of us. So we've talked about a little bit about the bullpen. Now we're going to move into I'm not going to say it's a controversial topic, but it is a pretty important one. That is the contract talks with Pete Alonso. He's a free agent after 2024. John, what are your thoughts on those? What do you think the numbers should be? How do you think the Mets have handled that so far?
Well, I mean, first off, let's look at the Mets contracts that they currently have. There's 10 guys under contract. Now, obviously, there's going to be a lot more. Okay, a lot of guys in the 40-man roster that haven't been given their offer yet. They haven't settled with arbitration, right? That all has to play out. So the 10 guys they have under contract: Francisco Lindor, Brandon Nimmo, Edwin Diaz, Starling Marte, Kodai Senga, Jeff McNeil, Jose Quintana, Omar Narvaez, Brooks Raley, and DJ Stewart. Those are their contracts, right? So I believe with two of those guys really have been I want to take a key look at here because they're going to, explain my thought process into this. So we are going to look at Brandon Nimmo and Edwin Diaz. Now, obviously, Brandon Nimmo, a guy that's homegrown, drafted out of the Mets back, 2012, 2013, if I'm not mistaken. So first round pick, homegrown, spent all this time here. They had contract extension talks last year. A lot of rumors that he might go, he might stay, and they got the deal done. Edwin Diaz, now he wasn't a homegrown. He was in that Robinson Cano deal, right? He came along with that. That was a huge trade at the time. And it's really worked out because we gave up Jared Kelenic, who so far hasn't panned out. So I'm kind of happy about that trade. But nevertheless, Edwin Diaz, they let him hit the market and he re-signed with the Mets. And that's kind of what I think they will do with the Pete Alonso. Now, I don't know if he gets the long-term contract extension. I don't know. But with Pete, right, I do not believe they are going to get an extension through this summer. I don't. I think they're going to play it out, right? And I think that they're going to, they'll have their talks, right? The rumors will be there with the Cubs, the Giants, the Mariners, whoever wants Pete. The Rangers, they'll have their rumors, but at the end of the day, on the opening day of this year, I think he'll be a Met. Now, I think it's a bigger conversation next year because that's just not how the Mets operate. Unless they trade for a guy on the spot, as you've seen with Lindor, they really don't offer a whole lot of extensions until the deal is done. The only guy that's been an extension that's kind of been it was more of an arbitration extension was Jeff McNeil. And it was kind of a bargain deal.
4 years, correct, John?
Yeah, it was a 4-year, $50 million deal. So it wasn't like he broke the bank at second base for anyone. So, Armin, I'll give you your thoughts on this.
I agree with you. I don't think an extension is going to get done this offseason. It's obviously going to be talked about when spring training comes along all the time. It's going to be talked about on every spring training game. You're going to hear it on SNY from all their shows, WFAN. And it's going to get deeper and deeper as the season goes on, especially if they're out of the playoff race. Do they copy what the Yankees did when Chapman was going to be a free agent, when they traded him to the Cubs at the deadline? If they're not in the playoff race, do they trade him and then try to re-sign him in the offseason? Because then there'll be no qualifying offer attached to him. I don't think they want to go. I know I've read that Pete wants 10 years. I don't think he ever gets 10 years from the Mets or any team. I wonder if he's willing to go 7 years. I think that's the sweet spot. 8 might be like 10 too much, but the team might have to go 8 years. I wonder if he would go 7 and take a little bit more money, AAV wise, just to take less years. Maybe he takes 6 years for more money, like 32 to 35 million a year.
How old is Pete going to be this year? Because I'm
30.
thinking,
He's going to be 30.
That's right around the Judge numbers when he was up for that contract. So, as you said, you think 10 years is too much. 7 could be the right number, but maybe they have to go for 8. So, do you wonder, do they have like 7 years plus 1 with a player option, possibly, or a club option, mutual option? So, you think of that.
I also think when you look at Pete's deal long term, he has to be willing, because when age comes, he's gonna lose defensive. He's gonna lose some fielding due to age. So he's gonna have to become the full-time DH, and at some point, based on how long the contract is. So going forward, you're gonna look at Bart. You're gonna look at kids being in the DH role. And possibly 1 year guys like similar to JD Martinez going to the Dodgers for the DH role with the beginning part of Pete's contract, when he's an everyday first baseman.
So what number are you guys thinking? Not in terms of years, but salary.
I'm thinking he's like he's not a $300 million player, but I'd probably say he gets around $200 million on the open market.
How much do you think so in AAV? Like
maybe. I mean, now I could be wrong, and his value can easily change. This year it can go up, it can go down. But if you want to give him a 6-year, 7-year, $200 million contract, right? We're talking about anywhere from maybe a 32 to maybe a $35 million AAV. I don't think he gets like something like 40 AAV. I don't think he gets.
No, he's not going to get 40 because
he is. Now let's talk about Pete just for a second.
Yeah,
because you want to talk about position players of where he ranks. Obviously he's up there with Lindor and Nimmo, right? As their 3 best position players by far.
Right.
And obviously they all do things much differently, so it's kind of hard to compare them. Now Pete might be my favorite Met, but it's hard. It's a little hard to compare their game styles. But what is Pete? He's a masher. He's a generational power hitter. This dude is a guy that is going to put up 40 homer plus seasons. He's going to drive in more than 100 runs, and I know that because he's shown he can already do it in his 5-year career here so far. That is what his game is, right? And I hope to see him. One thing to improve in the offense. I don't blame his batting average. This is kind of also why I didn't really like Vogelbach. I really think having Vogelbach set up Alonso to fail a little bit, because you could pitch around Pete, because at that time, you knew Vogelbach wasn't getting a hit. You knew that wasn't happening. They didn't have a true number 5 hitter behind him that could protect him, and I think that really did hurt. So I think with Alonso, you're going to see all the guy, if you can, I put it out in my video, you get a guy that protects him. He can hit 265, 270 and still hit 40.
I think your issues with Alonso's protection are the same ones we had with Aaron Judge, having freaking Donaldson as one of his protection. You guys just mentioned Vogelbach, but yeah, I think his numbers would get better. I just wanted to say that if he has better protection in the lineup.
Mm-hmm.
Also, when he got hit in Atlanta, hit on his wrist, I think that affected him coming back when he came back.
You're right.
I thought he could
too early.
I thought he came back too early. I thought he should have stayed out the month and see what happens and fully heal. But you saw him struggle, especially swinging and missing on certain pitches that he probably would put contact on.
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. And
I think, and also like you said, John, he had no protection. I don't think they're going to get that big time bat this year, because
now they don't. I think the guy need a superstar.
No, I think the bat that's going to be behind him is already on this team, and that's Alvarez. I think you're going to see Pete and Francisco as the 4-5 guys.
That's a possibility.
It makes a good meat of the order.
It's a possibility. Now, I'd still prefer someone maybe in between them. You could have Alvarez as 6, or maybe someone after Alvarez, another guy. I just want to see one more guy in there. But with Pete, right, I don't think he gets the contract extension, but we've seen it. The Mets will re-sign their free agents. They will sign the core free agents. Everyone says, oh, DeGrom walked on them. Well, that was the right move because DeGrom had a lot of arm issues, a lot of injuries.
After 5 starts, he got hurt. He was out for the season.
Yeah, he was out for the season. You look at other guys that have walked on us last year. Chris Bassett. Now, Chris Bassett was someone that, we knew he wasn't going to be part of the core, but maybe someone you wanted to keep. Maybe that was the one that got away. But also, Taijuan Walker walked from us last year, and I thought that was the right move. And, our replacement was Quintana. Now, if Quintana stayed healthy the whole year, that would have been better. But you looked at how Taijuan Walker pitched with Philly. He wasn't that good. They had to go get Michael Lorenzen as another starter.
Exactly.
He wasn't that good. He didn't even start for them in the playoffs, really. I don't think he did.
No, they put Lorenzen in the bullpen.
No, I'm talking about Walker.
Oh no, Walker didn't. I don't even think he was on the roster. I don't think Lorenzen was on the roster and in the bullpen.
Yeah, I don't remember any instance where Walker was pitching at all.
Right. So you can look and say, oh, the Mets have lost some key free agents. Well, they weren't core guys, and I think Pete is a core guy.
I do wonder if Walker had the qualifying offer on him. Does he get that deal from Philly?
That's a different story, but. Again, with Pete, he's a core guy, and I think the Mets will, and I think Steve Cohen will, he knows who's part of this franchise, and I'm sure Stearns is not stupid. He knows how much the Mets fans like him. Okay, he knows that he's not a stupid guy. Now, it might not be his top priority because, like Mike said in that interview, run prevention, pitching, and defense. So, yes, Alex already making fun of me. David Cohen and Steve Stearns. I mixed it up for a sec.
By the way, also Almighty says Alonso's out of there, but he cried about it.
Oh, you know what? Almighty? You know how I'll respond? You can enjoy your DH, Giancarlo Stanton. Luke is shaking his head because he's like, "Hey, I'm not even gonna reply."
Pain, but continue, John.
Nevertheless, I don't see the extension getting done now, but I can easily see it next year, and that's how it should be.
Is it me, or does it seem like, well, I should say towards the end of the season, maybe when Stearns came in, that Pete wasn't exactly clamoring for an extension? He's like, no, not yet. Or am I reading that wrong?
Say that again. Repeat that.
No, I'm saying Pete wasn't, not that he wasn't motivated to get an extension done. He's like, no, it's not the time yet.
I think he was in the process of hiring Boris, so I think that's why he said that. Because he switched agent. So if he said yes, the time is now. That he had to say, he said the right thing because he was probably considering, do I switch agents? What do I do?
Armand, you're right though. Not many players. I guarantee you, 99.9% of players aren't going to sign big-term deals or big-time deals without an agent, especially if you're in the middle of changing it. Boris is going to get him his money.
Boris is this money.
That's what he is,
and a lot of it.
He's a pain in the ass for GMs, and for Pete, he's looking out for himself and saying, you know what, I want to be a Met. I also want to make money, and I'm not worried about that at all. Steve Cohen he really could wipe his ass with compared to you. When you want to put up a bid, he can wipe
$19.8 billion, people. And it keeps going up year in and year out.
Yeah, no, it's like chunk change millions for him. It's the truth, and I think the trade rumors were silly. And remember, let's also forget, before Stearns came in, players, the Fox reported this, players went into that front office to tell him how much they love Pete. He's great in that clubhouse, despite what some clowns have said. Pete Alonso was great in that clubhouse. No, and I know Luca laughs because I know the main guy that said it. We all do.
I
We all know how much I dislike
Sal
him.
the clown. Sal the clown.
That's right.
Sal the
He's,
Clown Licata.
That's right. And he called him toxic, and it drove me nuts when that happened. But it's just because you know why it drove me nuts? Because it's a lie. He's lying out of his teeth. And John Heyman.
And people would believe him because he's on WFAN and he's on SNY.
Hold up. John Heyman was on that interview, I believe. He did an excellent job pressing Licata about the issue. If anyone never saw it over the summer, I'm sure some people have. He did an excellent job as a reporter, as he should have. That's what you're supposed to do as a reporter. He did an excellent job when he was being interviewed on it. But I'm not going to go into that interview too much because I've already dived into my thoughts.
Yeah, you've already hammered Sal Licata. You've already hammered the nail on the head with that. And essentially,
I just have. So you brought up the rumors about Chicago calling about Pete and Seattle calling about Pete. I don't trust the Cubs because their owner doesn't really like to spend money. Now, he might be forced to because he paid counsel to bring in somebody. But also with the rumors of Seattle coming over this past weekend that Ohtani is not on their radar, why would then they trade for Pete? If you're not going to sign Ohtani to a long-term deal, why are you going to trade for somebody that's 1 year left when you have to give Pete an extension?
Yeah, because you have to give assets. And also, Armin, I love your point because remember the original trade rumors to Milwaukee. You think Milwaukee's calling them now? They're losing their they're losing things right now.
Yeah, they might lose Burns. They might run it back just to see, until the trade deadline.
They might lose their stadium.
No, that came out. They came to an agreement. They're getting the money for renovations for the stadium.
Finally, okay. At least that didn't.
It's only shit. It's only Oakland and Fisher.
Yeah, at least we don't have another Oakland situation, which I guess we could talk about another day. But we can move on.
Yeah, but I was going to say, like, I think personally, as you guys were hinting to, I think Milwaukee's headed for a rebuild somewhat because I don't think they've accomplished enough where they can continue with this core. They've been, how many playoff series have they won, like, at best? Because they had that big year in 2018 with Yelich and all those guys. Like, at max, they've won one playoff series, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Counsell in his last 10 games, from what I heard, he was 1-9 in his last 10 playoff games.
You know why Armin knows that? Because he watched my video.
Yes. But moving on to the final segment of our show, we're going to look at the prospect outlook. What guys do you think? I'm going to ask the both of you. I'll start with John and Armin. What prospects do you think are obviously could be a part of the Mets' future starting this year? And like what guys are you keeping your eye on? Really, I know Mike brought up Mike Vassell as a starting pitcher. I know John loves Jet Williams, obviously. Some other guys there as well. I forget some other names, but obviously Ronnie Mauricio came up last year. John, what prospects are you keeping up an eye on?
Now, I'll be honest. The only prospect I believe on the 40-man roster. So you look at, because I actually have it up. Luis Angel Acuna is on the 40-man roster, and I don't necessarily think that he's going to start in, with the Major League Club. I don't think that's going to happen. But he could get a mid-season call-up or late
September call-up. September call-up, maybe.
That could very well be the case.
Well, no matter no matter how good or bad the season is, because.
Yeah, and so I don't think these guys are ready. Now, the only guy that would technically qualify as one is Ronnie Mauricio, but I expect him to be part of the big leagues now. And before we go to the young guys on the roster, well, I'm talking about the guys. Let's talk about the guys in the system. I think you give Acuna time in AA, AAA. He's got a lot of talent. Runs the bases well, can hit for power, kind of like his brother in a sense. He's a very talented player. Drew Gilbert is another guy. He really killed it in AA last year when we acquired him. Hit 325 down there to go along with 6 homers. He was OBS almost at 1,000, 984. He's another lefty bat, that could get some time. Maybe he's more ready. You don't know. Not saying he's a bigger ceiling than Acuna. Jet Williams, you mentioned it. I don't think he's ready yet. Another shortstop prospect, but a lot of praise for him. Kevin Parada, another catching prospect. He's going to get some time in Double-A. Ryan Clifford is a guy, came over from that trade as well, along with the Drew Gilbert. He needs more seasoning down there. Probably get some more time with the Cyclones, if anything, or High A. We'll see where they put him. Colin Houck is going to be in rookie ball, so he won't be here. Marco Vargas, this is an interesting prospect. This is someone, he's 18 years old. He's probably going to get some time in Port St. Lucie. I don't remember which trade he came over from, if I'm not mistaken.
What's that name again?
Was it the Pham deal?
It might have been the Tommy Pham. No, it could be.
Give me what's the name? I'll look it up.
Marco Vargas. He's another infielder.
I recognize the name.
I think you're right. It might be the Pham deal, but he's someone that could be something in the future. And I don't think any of these guys are ready day one yet.
Robertson.
Oh,
it was
Robertson.
You're right. It was the David Robertson. I don't think any of these guys are ready because those are the main position prospects. They also have Alex Ramirez on the 40-man roster. He's kind of really fell off.
He had a bad season last year, but he's like my number one guys. I want to see what's going to happen, see how well he plays. Maybe if they're in it, maybe he's a part of the trade package at the deadline for somebody, maybe for a pitcher or the starter or bullpen, or maybe the bat that they need that they're willing to go get at the deadline.
Mm-hmm. And so I think I don't remember if it was this year, this year he was Rule 5 eligible, and that's why they had to protect him.
Yes, that's why they had to protect him. He would have been Rule 5 eligible.
Yeah. So he was a guy that he's kind of slipped down in the depth chart. I don't think any of these guys are ready yet. I think they need a lot of seasoning. And you talked to Mike actually talked about some of the pitchers. Mike Vassell, let's give him some time in AAA. He's probably our most closely ready. Maybe Blade Tidwell as well. You could probably he spent some time last year. He pitched pretty okay in AA. I'd like to see a lot more of him because I want to figure out these guys 3, 4, 5 starters. Any of these guys bullpen guys in the future. So you got Vassell.
I wouldn't mind to give them a few innings in the bullpen. Like if a bullpen guy was to go down, instead of looking like for like these old, like 34-year-olds.
Well, that might be late season because I don't want to throw these guys.
No, I agree. Like if in June, let's say Drew Smith was to go on the 10-day IL, instead of picking up just some 38-year-old, maybe you call up a Mike Vassell, put him in the bullpen, and maybe he gets 2 or 3 innings in a week coming out of the bullpen.
The other guy I wanted to, have fans like, Mets fans keep an eye on, mentioned by Mike as well. Christian Scott really did good in AA last year at a 2.47 ERA in, I think it was 12 games started. So he really impressed me with not only his stuff, but his location got really good. 0.84 whip, which is really impressive. Guy that can, he's got a good fastball, slider, changeup combination. So I think that's someone we got to keep an eye on. He might be a future starter one day. But again, I don't think any of these prospects are day one ready, but that's okay. They don't have to be. We don't need to, be rushing these kids up. Let's see what they can do more in the minors, slowly develop. Because remember, I don't think it's the biggest free agency class. I think the trade market kind of sucks. Not to say that the guys suck on it, but there's just a lot of risk, and I don't want to give these kids up for any of these prospects. And by the way, my favorite prospect on the team is Acuna. Okay, I think he's got the biggest potential out of all.
Here's a question, John. So right now you have Mauricio that could play second base. You have McNeil here. Do you think Acuna and Jet Williams, obviously they could play second and short, do they play them in the outfield in case they have to call them up, and play them in the outfield?
Here's what I think is going to end up happening, right? I think for right now this could change, in the possibility, is I'm just looking at the guys on the roster. The way it's set up with these kids, I think Alvarez is obviously the everyday catcher. I think he's the most safe player right now because he had a big season last year, his rookie season. Remember he struggled at first, but then he started getting better behind the plate and being able to hit for extra base hits. Remember, 25 homers last year. Guy's got a lot of power, okay? And We don't need him being a 300 hitter. We need him being a 30 home run hitter, drive in 80, 90 runs, a masher. You need those guys in your lineup. They provide a lot of value. And as long as he plays solid enough defense, I think that's pretty good. Then you look at the other kids, right? I think Beatty's right now probably the leader to start at third. Now, Beatty did not have he struggled a lot. Not in terms of seeing pitches, but he just couldn't produce with like the pitches in the strike zone. He just wasn't hitting it for whatever reason it is. And that's something I looked at, and I went back and watched why he was struggling, but did really good in AAA. Just he hasn't clicked it yet third
I feel
base.
it was more mental because he also took that stuff out on the field and he wasn't great defensively.
Right.
And
I think
I'm sorry to interrupt, John. He also had those. I remember reading those articles where he had problems with focus.
Correct, and he had the focus problems, and I think that really took a toll. And maybe he's not built for New York, but I don't want to just give up on him yet. I don't want to do that yet. I feel that people are saying, "Oh, he's a bust." Like, give him another season. Let's give him another season. See what he can do. If he doesn't pan out this season, then we say, "All right, kid, we got to move on." We gave you a little bit of last year before the year before that we got hurt. We gave you last year. We gave you this year. It's starting not to work. We're gonna and give him a lot of time. In terms of Mauricio and Vientos, I think they're going to be a lot of DH bats in there for them. And where Mauricio is going to play, I think you're going to see a lot of him more at second base. And McNeil, you move him to the outfield because remember, the outfield's a bit of a concern because Nimmo's in center, and that's fine. He's your everyday center fielder, but they signed DJ Stewart, but Marte's been really hurt. Marte's a player that's a very good player when he's on the field, very athletic, raw tool player. One of those rare 5-tool players. You might not put the 5-tool production though, but he had couple injuries. They didn't even let him play in the WBC because of it, and that still didn't help him because they shut him down. DJ Stewart I see is kind of a platoon outfield DH kind of spot.
Me too.
Pinch hitter.
That's where I think they get the bat for left field, or that could play all three outfield spots. Right-handed, I think they might go for a guy that's like a 1 or 2 year deal type of guy. Like I like Gurriel, who was on Arizona this year. Who there's no qualifying offer on him. He might cost a lot of money, but I don't think they go after him. I think they look for a guy that's a 1 or 2 year deal type of thing.
They look to more go in the trade market, right?
Yeah. Yes, they have. That's not a bad fourth outfield option if they wanted to go another route, right? Now, obviously, the best outfielder out there is Bellinger. They're not getting him. I'm trying to think of other guys. You mentioned Gurriel. That's not really the guy I want to necessarily target, but he's not a horrible option. Like he had a solid season last year. I don't know if it was a one-off year, but he's got talent. Like he's someone I wouldn't mind him. I wouldn't. He's not a guy I want to break the bank for, but you kind of need those guys in your lineup. One guy I really love. Maybe for a possible corner outfield or DH option, Jorge Soler.
Teoscar Hernandez.
I was actually going to ask you guys about this at the end of the show because SNY was doing their own segment with about 4 hitters for the designated hitter spot. I know you guys are talking about outfield, but real quick, I just want to get to these comments too. Nimmo's trash, mediocre at best.
No, he's a top 10 center field at least.
McNeil must lead off next season.
No. That's not.
I see Nimmo like I'm not even a Met fan. I see Nimmo as that leadoff hitter. He always will be. I don't think
because Brandon Nimmo is a guy that sees a lot more pitches. Now McNeil's a better contact hitter, but Nimmo sees a lot more pitches for the guys behind him, draws a lot more walks. Okay, and you can't argue that McNeil is faster than Nimmo because Nimmo's a better base runner, and maybe that's like the one.
Nimmo's a hustler. You see him hustle down one, and because he tries to get that catcher to think that he's going from home to second on that walk. So maybe he gets a bad throw to go from second to third if he does do that.
Sure. And, to go back, I'd say Mauricio's more of that guy at second, and then you have Beatty at third. I think Vientos gets some time at DH. Maybe he gets some third base time as well. That could be another option for him because I don't really see him being an outfield option. I mean, he could be, but I see him more of a third and a first base option, if anything. That's where I see him positioned. But I also feel he's just going to be he's probably our lead candidate for DH on this roster as we speak, just because he doesn't really have a position. He wasn't really good at third base. Has power, but he struggles to make consistent contact. A guy that could probably strike out a lot. So
I think Epler was the reason that he was held down a lot and not in the lineup.
That could, and again, that's hence why I say don't give up on these kids. Like a lot of you guys don't. Some guys don't realize you don't play for a certain amount of time. Your rhythm's off. Your timing's off. It's different from batting practice out there. You're not seeing 95 to 100 mile an hour fastballs every day because you're not getting the playing time. And if he was getting the playing time and he produced like that, then I could say, okay, not great. We're not. I personally still wouldn't give up. But let's just see what we have in these kids before we make a firm decision. So
absolutely,
I'd say give those kids the chance. Give them some time. You talk about outfield options though. I really would like a guy like I think a Jorge Soler could be a guy that protects Pete and a corner outfield option because they could definitely use that. You know what? I'd even bring back Tommy Pham. I know he didn't have the best comments about some of the lazy players. But I think Tommy Pham is a guy that I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind bringing a guy like Eddie Rosario. He could be a guy that you platoon and
just another left-handed bat.
Right? Yeah. I mean,
what about a Randall Grichuk? He's played all three outfield spots. You could use him as a DH, right-handed.
A bit injury prone, but he's not a bad option either.
He might be like the 1 year deal type of guy because,
right.
I don't know if they want that big bat. That's going to take a long-term deal.
Right.
From free agency this year, maybe next year.
Hunter Renfroe is another guy that I would definitely be intrigued by. JD Martinez is someone that hold up, Jacob. I'm going to answer this in a sec.
Yep.
JD Martinez is someone that I think is a very good 1 year deal option because that guy is kind of like the new Nelson Cruz. He never slows down. He had another quietly. I think he had 30 homers again.
I was about to say, wasn't he an all-star this year, or at least close to
yes.
it? I'll read off his
numbers.
No, JD Martinez was a phenomenal candidate.
I agree with John. I just think JD's looking for a long-term deal. I think he's looking for at least I'll say I think he's looking for at least 3 years or two with an option.
I wouldn't give him 3.
I wouldn't either.
I was going to say he made his third consecutive All-Star appearance, and he's made 6 All-Star appearances in his entire career. So,
he's a phenomenal hitter.
I think he's waiting to see where Ohtani lands. I think he's waiting to see where Ohtani lands because that might open up.
That's true. That could happen. And again, I didn't even bring up Ohtani's name, but I just never. I don't think it's going to happen. And I'm like, I've kind of lived through that moment. But to go to Jacob's question, how about? I think you're talking about Jung Ho Lee, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think that's gonna. I'm sorry.
No, I was saying he hit like 340 last year, like a 400 or plus on base percentage. I'll get the.
I think he's looking for a bigger contract. I'm looking at guys maybe 1-2 year contracts that could provide some protection. Another bat in that lineup. But I mean, if he wanted to come to us on a cheaper deal. Hey, I would sign me up for that.
So
I think if you were not to land Yamamoto and you wanted to spend the money that you were going to spend on Yamamoto, Jung Ho Lee might be that option from a position player standpoint.
You could. I mean, yeah, it depends.
But he's a center fielder. I don't know if he could play all 3 outfield spots. Are the Mets going to ask Nimmo to move to left field?
I don't think they are. I like his defense.
That's why I don't think they're in on him.
Yeah.
Unless he can play left field and is willing to go to left field.
Right.
He's another left-handed hitter.
Again, again, I'd say they're gonna be looking to spend more on pitching.
Oh, I agree.
In terms of a bigger bat, and that's why I throw out the guys maybe looking for 2-3 years deals at max.
I'm gonna bring up this guy who's 35. He could DH right-handed, but he could also play the outfield. Just on a 1-year deal, that's probably gonna cost you nothing. AJ Pollock. He
just has a big injury history, and I'm like,
like you, I wouldn't mind the return of Tommy Pham.
I wouldn't either. I thought he was a perfect 4th outfield candidate, but you can even start him every day and be fine. But Luca, you want to say something?
I was gonna say Jung Ho Lee's about 25 years old. He per Baseball Reference, he can actually play all over the outfield, left, right, and center. He's from reading the stats, he's more of a guy who can walk more than he strikes out. 6 homers, 45 RBIs last year in 86 games, 318, 406 on base percentage. His OPS was around 86. Even the year prior, his OPS was actually near 1,000. So like maybe he's a good fit for you guys again. You guys,
it's like another. Based on he's another leadoff guy, a guy you could put in the 2-hole maybe. So you're gonna go Nimmo Lee, that's lefty.
Maybe he's like another Seiya Suzuki, possibly. Somebody like that.
We'll see how that turns out.
Jacob also said, "How about Harrison Bader?"
Too many injuries.
That's a 2 injury prone. That's a 1-year deal. That's more of a 4th outfielder.
Just too many injuries. My opinion.
Same thing with Kevin. Would you guys wouldn't sign up for Kevin Kiermaier, would you?
No, he's a center fielder, and he's 2 injury prone, and it's another left-handed bat.
Yeah,
you got Nimmo, you got McNeil.
You guys have. I'll say this right now. You guys have the opposite of the Yankee problems. You guys are too left-handed, but we're just too right-handed.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, well, Lindor's a switch hitter. Alonso's right-handed.
Mauricio's a switch hitter.
Mauricio's switch, so it's not as bad. I'd say
it's a little more balanced, but you might need. Do you need that right-handed hitter?
We do. If Marte's healthy, he's an everyday right-handed hitter, but that's
if I was to do one move, so I'm going to bring up Tampa Bay again. I've heard that they really want to reduce payroll, and while Glasnow is their really top guy, they want to get rid of that $25 million. I remember rumors last year that they were listening on Randy Arozarena. He became available. He's a guy I would absolutely consider.
I love him. I mean, he's a phenomenal player.
If they really are trying to reduce payroll to a I've heard they want to go from where they are now. They're at like $100+ million. They want to get down to $90 million to start using some money. So.
Well, now I'll say this, and it's a bit of a tricky situation. The Wander Franco contract doesn't. I don't know what happens from that situation. I don't know if it becomes voided.
I think it's still on their payroll.
Well, I don't know if it for how long, because I don't think
wasn't it like a 10-year deal or 11-year deal?
Yes, something like that.
The length of term. But at some point, I don't think that stays on their book because of what happened. Because it doesn't like violate some contract clause in the contract?
No, he got paid to be on the. Doesn't he get paid being on the list? He still gets paid.
I don't know.
So it has to be on their payroll.
His contract right now is about 11 years, $182 million, which is an average annual salary about $16.5 million.
No, but yes, but I'm trying to figure out, does it not become voided at that point?
No, I don't think it's voided because nothing's come about the accusations.
But then, so if that's the case, why isn't he playing that now? I mean, I know why he's not playing. And I'm not saying.
So I'll say this for the record. I don't know about the contract voidage, but according to the restricted list, I think for MLB, I don't think they get paid. If I'm not mistaken,
that's what I thought. That's what I thought too.
Yeah, because I'm reading this up. They say a player on the restricted list does not count against the 40-man. Neither do they get paid.
Does it count against the payroll though? That's what I think. Also, John wants to know.
Yeah, does it count for their payroll still? I actually don't know about that. I'm thinking no, because you're not getting paid. So
right,
what
that's what I would
is
think.
There?
That's a very good point.
That's what I'm thinking. So that probably frees up their cap space or their money. So,
but I think if that freed up their cap space, like I get it, Glasnow's going into the last year of his deal.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you want to if you're getting already reduced? Like, why would you also look to really cut down to $90 million? Like, I
That's
get they
true.
don't want to.
Personally, as a Mets fan, I'd stay away from Glasnow.
I would too.
I don't want these pitchers with arm injuries. It always scares me. That's why I'm happy we have a lot of position player prospects because you can never have too many of those. But you could always get your arms in free agency. You don't need to. I mean, you could have. I mean, believe me, I do want pitching. Believe me, I want pitching. Like I want pitching. But
you need that.
And you could, if one or two of these prospects you don't think is working out, or you know something the other teams don't, flip him for the right starter, not just whoever's out there.
Exactly. I mean, I know you mentioned Bieber. I think last year you also mentioned another guy. It wasn't Glasnow.
I'm not interested in Bieber anymore, but
yeah, what is it? Didn't Mike mention something about injuries? He's a little on the injury prone side.
I think a lot of the pitchers that are outside of Cease. A lot of those pitchers are going into the last year of the deals. Like next year's free agent class, you're going to have Burns, Glasnow, Bieber on the free agent market. So, are you trading for them just for one season? Or are you going to,
no.
That's why you don't trade the high-end. Like, if you're trading high-end prospects for those types of guys, you're giving them an extension.
And I think that's the mistake that we should avoid.
I think if they were to trade for a pitcher, I think they might go for Cease because you're having him for 2 years of control. Or you're trading controllable assets for another controllable asset.
Right. Now, I still am cautious with Cease because I think he's a B-level player or B-level A talent, but just the production hasn't met the talent.
B-level production.
Mm-hmm.
I remember he was good, I want to say in 2022 or 2021, but he's just had some bad down 2 years
now,
as well.
It could also be because he's been a Garbo White Sox team.
That's true. It's true.
I mean,
it does have that effect.
It's hard to want to show up to work when you're playing in a dump and with the White Sox, but
who knows? I'll look up his stats right now before we close out. Again, wins and losses could be affected because he could be allowing I don't know how many runs, but Dylan Cease last year off the basic stats, 7-9 with a 4.58 ERA in 33 games, 214 strikeouts in 177 starts. Now, I don't think I know many pitchers who reach 200 strikeouts, to be fair.
No,
so maybe
he probably is the best starter, like Armand said, because of the control.
And that's why he's going to cost a lot. Like he might cost you a Parada. He might even,
but also if you're thinking this from a Mets standpoint, you want the White Sox to lose leverage, and they lose leverage by holding on to him for too long. So maybe nobody bites yet, and that might be a chance they have to take in the future. But
deadline,
maybe
that's a deadline. Just trading for a year and a half of control is still going to cost you much. He would have to have at least, I would say, a 6 ERA where he's pitching bad, even with that year and a half of control. Like you're trading him for pennies or nickels on the dollar.
Yeah, I mean, it might cost us a guy like a Drew Gilbert or a guy like a Mark Vientos, but that might be a future.
But the White Sox have other players, whether you like them or not, that you could trade for, like a Michael Kopech, that might cost less. Yeah, but he's more of a back end of the rotation guy.
I don't like Kopech. His arm is already blown out.
Now, there's one guy I'd like from the White Sox. He's a lefty reliever, but he's injury prone. Is Garrett Crochet?
Yeah, he's just so injured though. I know what you're talking about.
But I was going to say, because we're close to wrapping up here, I know SNY was talking about these four names. You guys brought them up. We'll do a quick thumbs down or thumbs up segment. I'm going to give you four names that why did you say the Knicks? The Mets maybe should sign. I know you guys talked about the designated hitter position, some outfield help as well. I'll start off with number one, Teoscar Hernandez. Thumbs up or thumbs down?
I agree with John.
You think he had a down year in Seattle?
Yeah, but also like he's a powerful right-handed hitter. I understand that, but I just I feel like he's a guy that's gonna want too much money because of his past seasons with Toronto.
He's gonna want like a 4-year deal or something.
Yeah, and
maybe.
I want to not touch that.
I don't think you get him on a 1 or 2-year deal.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So right. I know Jacob's bringing this restricted list stuff up. If a player through some action of his own is unable to render his service to the club, the team may petition MLB to have the player on the restricted list. Generally, the list is used for a long-term absence, such as drug suspension, visa problem, or leaving without the permission. Player on the restriction list does not count as the 40-man roster. There is no maximum length of time he must stay on the list. A player on the restricted list does not earn service time, nor does he get paid. But again, the problem is, does he count against the payroll? And I'm assuming if he doesn't get paid, do they like hold that back, or do they just say, you know what, he's not on the books whatsoever? But the next name I want to get into, pull it up here, Jorge Soler. I know John had a thumbs up on him. Okay. Jorge Soler from the Marlins. How about this Philly? I think he was injured for some part of the season, and that's why Bryce had to take over first base. Rhys Hoskins.
Because he's just a first baseman. He's going to want to play first.
Yeah,
I would rather Teoscar Hernandez than Rhys Hoskins, because at least I don't think Rhys wants to just be a DH.
If he did want to be a DH, you could sell me on that. But if that's the case, then probably not.
And then the last name, I'm sure this is unanimous between both of you, JD Martinez.
I'm like this because he wants a long-term deal and he's waiting on Ohtani. If it's a 1-year deal, yes. Anything more than that,
1 or 2 years, I would do for JD.
I thought you guys could have signed him last year because I thought
I did.
Yeah, he would have been a lot cheaper.
That's true.
That's true. Coming off,
but Epler, stuck around and wanted to stick it with Vogelback.
But it was funny because I thought Correa would be a great fit for you guys because he was a righty power. Obviously played could play third base.
We all saw how that worked out.
Yeah, right, and it obviously worked out for the better for your guys' sake. But JD Martinez,
it worked out better for the Mets and the Giants.
Yes. And on the Twins,
let's just hope the Giants can get a player to sign there with them.
Yeah, instead of Arson
because they've struck out so much in San Francisco.
Yeah, they went all in on Plan B instead of Plan A. Aaron Judge did not sign. Carlos Correa did not sign. They ended up saying Michael Conforto, but keep in mind, Wander's Franco's contract is backloaded. Yes, because obviously he has that big deal. What did I say? 11 years, $182 million.
It's backloaded so they could trade it at the right time.
Yes.
Correct.
It's
very
just
much
like
so.
Longoria, just like they did with Longoria.
Oh yeah, Longoria. But getting into our final thoughts, let's start out with Armand, then John, and I'll go to myself.
Thanks Luca, thanks John, thanks chat, thanks Mike. Everybody, happy Thanksgiving. Mets sign every overseas player. Yamamoto, Rodriguez. They're only going to cost money. You don't want to lose the draft picks, the qualifying offer guys. Go sign those guys. Go to a 7-man rotation. Who cares? You need as much pitching as possible. The Texas Rangers showed that. They showed that last year.
Can never have enough pitching, as Jacob says. Only $8 million against the payroll. I think this year. It's not much of a salary cap, but it is a payroll. But John.
Well, I'd like to thank Mike Silva again for joining us for that hour. Does some really good stuff. I have seen his stuff before, so guys, check him out. Alex already put his Twitter in the description. I believe he also put out his podcast, Talkin Mets, in the description, in the comment section as well. So go check it out, please. All right. And we're gonna have more. I'm gonna have more Mets content for y'all. I do have a video coming out tomorrow. Some of you fans might not like it, but that's okay.
You'll be fighting words, John. Fighting words. I got your back.
We might be battling for a certain starter, but
little game of tug of war between the New York franchises. Tug of war. But final thoughts. Even as me as the Yankee fan moderator, who I obviously did a lot of the streams with John, I got a good perspective of the Mets. But obviously pitching for the most part for the Mets this year and internal development. As Mike said, I don't think it's going to be a sexy offseason for the Mets, but you know what? They'll make, as John is actually holding a baseball. But final thoughts. It was great to have Mike on. Great to have Armand on. I like this kind of Mets discussion. I know we're a Yankees channel, but you know what? Just adding a new flavor to the mix is just awesome. And you guys made some great questions, comments, and all that. John, as he said, he's going to make a video as soon as possible for the embattled start.
Coming out tomorrow. Yep.
Coming out tomorrow. I don't know if Alex will have any content out before Thanksgiving, but even as Armand said, we wish y'all a very happy Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Enjoy your football. By the way, I just want to mention I am actually going to. I want to make you guys jealous. I'm actually going to the Fox Thursday NFL taping that Thursday to this Thursday in the morning with Terry Bradshaw, Michael Strahan, the Fox pregame for
nice,
Thanksgiving.
Nice.
But I just want to make you all jealous.
I thought you were about to say. I thought you were about to say you don't want to make you guys jealous because you're going
to the funeral on Friday.
No, take
That's
those
right.
tickets.
I am going to the funeral on Friday. But
Believe me, I won't be jealous.
Wear black. Wear black.
Yes, absolutely. But we appreciate you all. We'll see y'all later. Have a happy Thanksgiving.